was the editor of this little magazine which reported on those Mohammed cartoons that led to riots around the world.
We wanted to show our readers what the fuss was about.
But he soon discovered that in Canada, the fuss was about him.
One day, a registered letter arrived at my office from something called the Alberta Human Rights Commission. It's a government agency, and they said I had received a complaint against me for hate speech. I was ordered to come down to an interrogation, and for 90 minutes, the most bizarre thing happened. A government bureaucrat grilled me on my religious and political views. And if I gave the wrong answer, I would be subject to fines or other punishments.
Well, that's why just a piece of the hour show we did on speech, and I hope we educated some people. Apparently you people don't need educating, but thank you, Ezra, for what you do. Now I'll talk a bit about me. I've been in the news lately because I'm suing Facebook. It's a whole new dimension of free speech because Facebook's a private company, and even though America, even in Canada, I imagine, private companies can censor or allow to speak anybody they want. My situation is kind of odd. I did a report on California's wildfires, and are these, how do I know if my slides are moving along? What are they seeing here? Well, we should see the next one now. Good reporting had noticed that although the California governor and many people were saying, it's climate change. It wasn't climate change. It was partly climate change. California's climate had warmed 3 degrees. But I said in my piece, these were government-fueled fires because the government hadn't picked up the debris on the ground, and that was the main reason that the fires were happening. And we had good documentation for this. One of Facebook's censors put this thing up, and I would say, who cares, except when these fact checkers put something up like that, Facebook reduces your reach. And my reach on Facebook had been pretty good. The reason I'm suing Facebook is because although they can say whatever they want about me, this is what the fact checker put up. Now, you would think, since it's in quotation marks, that this is what I said, but it's not. Forest fires are caused by poor management, not by climate change. I didn't say that. I said climate change plays a role. I said California warmed 3 degrees, but they put this in quotes as if I said it, the fact checker. And that's a lie, and they don't get to lie about me. They put up partly false information. And if you look down on this slide, I was getting 24 million views for this piece. Piece was titled, Are We Doomed? It was about climate change. 3 good scientists argued that it's real, but we're certainly not doomed because we can adjust like the Dutch did. They built dikes long ago, long before we had modern machinery. We can adjust to rising water levels. After the fact checker said, you know, Stossel is partly false, my reach went down to several thousand people on Facebook. So this is my new business model. I'm no longer on Fox, where I interviewed Ezra. I release a 5-minute video, kind of like the Give Me a Breaks I used to do on 2020 every Tuesday. And Facebook was how I reached millions of people. Now suddenly squeezed. So who are these people? Well, the Poynter Institute appoints fact checkers, and this is the fact checker who got me. He is a French guy, a PhD, who lives in Paris and censors whoever he wants. He's the censor in chief. Back to me. No, go back one, Rebecca. Go back to that. Anyway, Facebook can say whatever they want. In short, his organization censored me through Facebook without watching my video. We go further than the typical cover it today. We stay on a subject. And we contacted the reviewers who said there was missing information in my story and asked, well, what was missing? And a couple of them agreed to speak with me. And they surprised us by saying, when I asked, well, what did you see in the video that bothered you? They said, well, we never watched your video. So climate feedback, if they decide they don't like your topic, they will just shut it down without watching the video, and they'll make up quotes. And that's the defamation. And that's why I'm suing. Although these social networks are disgusting for hiring people like Emmanuel Vincent, that's legal. I'm hoping that in my lawsuit settlement, I can persuade them not to use people like him. So who am I? Well, I've been a reporter a long time. This is what I looked like when I started. Hairstyles were different. And I was a consumer reporter. I was probably your enemy because I had the basic liberal philosophy I'd been taught at Princeton, which was, capitalism is okay, brings us some stuff, but by and large, it's cruel and unfair, and we need government to protect us from the capitalists. I need my notes. We're still working out the Zoom here. And I was rewarded for that. I won lots of Emmy Awards because the media likes nothing more than bashing business. So some years I got so many Emmys, people thanked me for not having an entry in their category. And people also liked it because in my pieces I said, well, we're covering fraud. These people cheated. The solution is regulation, command and control. And people, almost everybody likes that. I bet you like it. When we see a problem, we say, there ought to be a law. It's just instinct. And when the people are smarter than we are, it's even more appealing. I don't know how to design a sewage treatment plant. We want to have a Harvard-educated person show us, direct us on how to change the light bulb. And it's ridiculous in this cartoon, but intuitively, it makes sense to people. It made sense to me. I kept winning Emmy Awards until I saw the regulation fail. And the cheaters kept getting away with it. The people selling the burn fat while you sleep pills. The regulators would barely stop them. But every other business in the world had to spend a little more money or not develop a new product to protect themselves from the regulators. And the layers of that are insane. I tried to open a lemonade stand in New York City. I couldn't do it legally in 60 days. You have to register with the county clerk's office. And you have to do that in person. You have to apply to the government for an ID number. You have to take a 15-hour food protection course. Then you take an exam. If you pass, you have to wait 5 weeks for your food protection certificate. Then you have to have a health department inspection. It takes 3 weeks just to get an appointment. And if you pass, you can set up your business once you buy a government-approved fire extinguisher. So these rules stop so many good things, but they barely make us safer. But politicians and voters like command and control. It's hard to explain what I trust you, working with Ezra, know, which is that the spontaneous order, free people working together, the invisible hand, do much better. And although I was a consumer reporter, I soon saw that competition of the market polices itself. It's much better for consumers than government trying to set restrictive rules. It's not perfect. There are scams and bubbles, Enrons, and who knows what'll be coming next. And they'll pass many more rules to pretend to stop it, but they won't work because far better is the invisible hand. But how do I explain an invisible hand? It's invisible. When Adam Smith looks like a fat cat, he's not a good role model for a TV program. Part of it is the spontaneous order that people work things out on their own. You see it in a flock of birds, a school of fish. How do I explain it for people? I tried doing that with putting on a skating rink and getting an Olympic skating champion in the middle with a megaphone to direct people, to show how that didn't work. Even when people start to get this, they say, well, maybe markets or freedom is okay for the skating rink, for business if you're selling movies or clothing or music. But if lives are threatened and if the product is too complex, you just have to have government control. Take cars as an example. I don't know anything about engineering or car safety. How do we know if we're safe? And that scares people away from the free market. But consider real life. There was one country that controlled car making and had some real geniuses making cars, the East Germans. We make jokes about, well, he's no rocket scientist. Well, these were rocket scientists that made the Trabant. And it was a terrible car. You had to put the oil and gas in separately and shake the car to mix them together. They're polluted. And as soon as there was competition, as soon as the Berlin Wall fell, the Trabant disappeared. Their best couldn't compete with our mediocre products. Why? Because you don't have to be an expert for the free market to work its magic. You just need 2% of the people, some car buffs, and then word of mouth spreads. 2% of the people, 5% who read the car magazines. The good news spreads, the bad news spreads. The good companies with better products grow, the bad ones atrophy. That works. The skeptics still say, even if that's true, what about safety? If it weren't for government, companies, factory owners wouldn't care if they would kill their employees. What would they care about worker safety? That's why you need the government. And under President Clinton, he was fond of showing this slide to show how since the creation of OSHA, the workplace death rate, injury rate too, had steadily dropped. And that's impressive. President Biden wanted OSHA to police the companies in America to make sure that they obey his vaccine mandate, which has now been held up, fortunately, by the courts. So impressive as this chart is, it's only impressive if you don't look at the chart from before OSHA. Some researchers went back and charted that, and then they got this chart. You see, the slope of the line was about the same before and after OSHA. That's because when people are free, things get better. When there's an accident, people learn from their mistakes. They correct for it. When you are richer, you care more about safety as more wealth is accumulated. Wealthier is healthier. Factory owners care. I mean, even if it's only because it's expensive to replace workers who you kill. Government's like someone who jumps in front of the parade and says, I led the parade. Unfortunately, voters believe. Government solutions don't do better than the market, and they always create nasty, unintended consequences because government is force. And that relates to our vaccine problem. That all of the market is voluntary. Nobody buys anything from the biggest scammer unless the scammer can convince you his product is better. But government can put you in jail or take all your money, take your freedom, can kill you if it thinks you're breaking a law that deserves that. Yet, government grows. This is a graph of the growth of government, the United States government since the beginning of the Republic. As you see, it was pretty small, of less than 5% of GDP for most of our history. The first blip is World War I, then World War II. And then since then, the line has just gone straight up. The little drop at the end was only because it was the end of the last stimulus. I haven't updated this, I should. But it's going straight up now that we old people rudely refuse to die. And governments have promised to pay for pensions and healthcare for us. The money isn't there. It's worked so far because there have been more young people, but it is utterly unsustainable, yet it keeps going up. And what do most people want? More government. Government should step in and fix this. Stimulus program. Now we're facing vaccine mandates. And I think at your conference, you're going to talk a lot about this. I'm probably not on some of your side on this. As a libertarian, I don't want government to do much but keep me safe, run the courts, and stay out of my life. But when there's an epidemic and a disease threatens innocent people, there is a role for government. I think it's wrong for us to complain about being forced. Someone at your conference is going to talk about perhaps losing her job at her university. She's saying she was forced to get vaccinated. But I disagree. The university has a right to force you to stand on your head. And if you want to work there, you have to stand on your head. It's their university. If they feel for the safety of the majority, they want you vaccinated, they have a right to mandate that. And you don't have to work for them. It's different for governments because we only have one government. There was one time when there was a genuine mandate. That was in Philadelphia about 30 years ago. There was a measles epidemic. Let me see, what was the data on 1,000 cases? 9 people died. And it was happening because there was a group of religious fundamentalists who didn't believe in vaccines. And Philadelphia passed a law mandating that every person be vaccinated. This group turned out to be obedient and they followed orders. I don't think people would today, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But let's remember, if a company requires it or your university requires it, that's not force. If your government requires it, that's force. And I want to just move on to other issues that are important to me, and then you can criticize me or ask about them. The bottom line to me as a libertarian and a consumer reporter is, what works? What makes people's lives better? There are 7 billion people on Earth. For most of them, life sucks. For maybe 1 billion, life's pretty good. Why? Why is it good for us and so tough for so many people around the world? I asked this of an auditorium filled with high school students in America, New Jersey, and there's just dead silence. Why are we prosperous? What created prosperity? And then one kid stands up and says, we have a lot of natural resources. Another kid says, we invented democracy. They don't know about the Greeks. And people nod their head at that. But then I'm able to point out, what about Hong Kong? It's a rock, no natural resources, no democracy. They had the British rulers, then the communists, and yet Hong Kong went from third world poverty to one of the richest countries in the world in just 50 years. India has democracy. India has natural resources. India is poor. One kid says, well, they're overpopulated. But actually, the population density of India and New Jersey are the same. It's not about population. It's about economic freedom. Oh, you have Hong Kong up? Put Hong Kong back up. Look at Hong Kong. It's an amazing success story until now that the Chinese have taken over. Low taxes. Anybody is free to start a business. I mean, Hong Kong is first on the economic freedom list. Canada's 9th. United States is 20th. You have a lower debt and lower deficit that puts you ahead of us. On the other hand, Canada's government does things like prop up Air Canada. So you don't really have economic freedom. But Hong Kong is such a good example because in America, I can't start a legal business except if I carefully hire a lawyer. In a couple states, I can do it in 2 weeks. In Hong Kong, I could do it in 1 day. Stand in line, pay $25 fee, which actually just took 1 hour. It was a stupid business of Stossel Enterprises selling ABC frisbees and yo-yos. But that opportunity to try something makes all the difference. In India, you apply and your application sits on shelves like these for years. That's why India is poor. Now, we need some government. You need security, you need pollution control, but limited government is what allows people to prosper. And yet in every country, government grows. We say it has to grow because we have to do more. The poor are suffering and struggling. And yet the poor live lives and longer lives that are better than what the kings and queens in Versailles once lived. We have poor people have air conditioning, flush toilets, fresh food in the winter, music and theater on demand, pain relief and pills. We've got cars, airplanes, electric light. We take all this for granted. We take it for granted when we go to the supermarket that there's all that food and it's unbelievably cheap. And the aisles are wide and it's well lit and it's open 24/7. Name me a government office that is. We just accept it. We accept that you go to a foreign country and you can stick plastic in the wall and cash comes out, or you can give a piece of plastic to that woman in the picture who doesn't speak your language and she'll rent you a car for a week. When you get home, MasterCard or Visa will have the accounting correct to the penny. If they don't, you'll scream. You just expect it. And yet government can't even count votes accurately. Yet people want governments to do more. Governments fail, but individuals succeed amazingly if we leave them alone. I hope you fight so that for that right for people to do that, so liberty can win. And if you want to know more about me, I have lots of videos if you go to johnstossel.com.